The early morning rain poured down on the glass roof of the Williams and Stone skyscraper like a melancholic soundtrack for the day's beginning. Maya Williams sat pensively in her office on the 42nd floor, where the glass walls opened to a panoramic view of New York City, waking up amidst the waterlogged clouds. She wore a dark suit, sharp and tough, just like herself. Her deep black eyes were like abysses, but behind the perfect layer of mascara lay a weariness that was hard to hide. 3 years ago, her husband, Richard Williams, died in a car accident. Since then, Maya had controversially taken over as CEO, not only because she was a woman of color among a sea of white men, but also because of rumors that she was not up to the task. They were wrong. Maya not only held her ground but also led the company to exceed growth expectations. But this success came at a cost. She paid with her sleep, her faith, and gradually with her heart. Ms. Williams, her personal assistant's voice crackled over the radio. Mr. Walter Crenshaw wants to meet with you privately this morning. Maya narrowed her eyes. Walter was the cunning, conservative chairman of the board who once tried to push her out of the CEO seat. Let him wait, she replied, standing up and grabbing the cold, bitter coffee from her desk as she stepped out of the office. The elevator stopped at the 30th floor, the administrative area. Maya stepped out, not to meet anyone but because she needed to walk a bit, to shake off the heavy pressure weighing on her shoulders. That's when she saw him that a thin man was cleaning the glass corridor. His pale blue janitor's uniform was worn and slightly loose but clean. He wore earphones and nodded his head to the faint jazz music playing from an outdated MP3 player. What was special was, he was smiling. Not a polite or silly smile, a genuine, warm smile, almost peaceful. Maya stopped and stared. She didn't realize she was staring until he turned and caught her gaze. Sorry, am I blocking your way? He asked, removing his earphones. His voice was low, soft as silk but steady. No. Maya shook her head, feeling awkward. I'm just taking a walk. He nodded and returned to his work. No questions, no flattery like the usual subordinates. He was simply a hard-working man content with what he was doing. Maya walked away without knowing why her heart skipped a beat. She began to see him more often in the basement hallway, by the vending machines, or in the underground parking lot. It seemed he was always somewhere in the background of this stressful picture. Silent, dedicated, and invisible to the rest of the world. She asked her assistant, "Who is the janitor on the west corridor of the 30th floor?" "Carter," her assistant answered. "Dante Carter. He's worked here for 2 years. Very quiet." The name made Maya pause slightly. Dante, evoking old poems, souls walking through hell. She chuckled quietly at herself. She was overthinking. He was just a janitor. But that afternoon, when Maya came home late and saw the corridor lights still on, she instinctively walked toward them. Dante was mopping the floor, sleeves rolled up, revealing faint scars, traces of the past. "Do you often work this late?" Maya asked. "Often," he replied. "It's busy during the day. I prefer the quiet." "Quiet is a luxury," she whispered, "especially here." "For me, it's necessary," he smiled. "There are things people only hear in silence." His answer froze Maya for a few seconds. Strangely, she wanted to hear more, but she only nodded and left, leaving behind another skipped heartbeat. The next morning, Maya was summoned to a board meeting. Walter sat at the head of the table, smiling as if preparing for a feast. "We have received a takeover offer from Northbridge Corporation," Walter said, "at twice the market value." Maya clenched her fists. "We are not selling." Walter tilted his head. "Maya, this is an opportunity for the company to go further, and for you to step down with honor." "You mean I'm being replaced?" "No, I mean a chance to rest." Maya stood up, silent. She stormed out of the meeting room, but behind her was a dangerous undercurrent ready to erupt. That afternoon, the rain was heavy. Maya hid in the utility floor where almost no one came. She leaned against the wall, breathing heavily. Everything was slipping out of control. One wrong step, and she could lose everything. "Are you okay?" Dante's voice came from behind. Maya startled and turned. He was standing at the hallway's end, still holding his mop. "I just need a bit of quiet," she said. Dante nodded and came closer, saying nothing more. He sat down against the opposite wall, leaving just enough space between them. "They're pushing you into a corner," he said, as if he had overheard the entire meeting. "They don't want someone like you in that position. Someone like me? Smart, strong, and not easily controlled." Maya smiled bitterly. "What do you know about me?" "Not much, but I hear how employees talk about you. How they bow their heads, how they fear your gaze. But I also see how you eat alone, never leave the office before 9 at night, and how you looked at me the first day." Maya looked at him, speechless. "You're not lonely because you're strong," he continued. "You're lonely because you don't trust anyone." Silence stretched. Then Maya quietly asked, "What about you? Who are you really, Dante?" He looked at her. In that moment, something in his eyes, deeper and more experienced than his outward appearance. "I used to work at a tech company," he said. "I was an engineer, but then I chose to leave it all. Because of a mistake, and because I needed to fix myself." "You came here to hide?" "No, to live again. Here, no one cares who I used to be. I can be myself." Maya was silent. There was something about him that made her feel safe, like a small light in the storm. Since that day, they met more often, always by chance, always quietly. But their conversations gradually grew longer, deeper. Maya began to ask about his past, and Dante started to care about the pressures she faced. One evening, as Maya was preparing to leave the building, she saw Dante sitting outside under the awning, watching the rain. "Do you believe in rebirth?" he asked as she approached. "Rebirth? That people can change, not because they're forced to, but because they choose to." Maya didn't answer right away. She sat down beside him. "I used to believe," she said. "Now I don't know. In the world I live in, change often means failure." Dante looked at her for a long time. Sometimes, refusing to change is the greatest failure. In the silence of the rain, Maya felt something inside her begin to shift. A small seed of belief was being planted, not by sweet words or clever strategies, but by the simple, sincere presence of an unexpected man. And in that moment, as the streetlights reflected in his eyes, Maya realized, perhaps for the first time in years, she no longer felt alone. The large glass door of the studio closed behind Maya and Dante, leaving behind the cheers and bright camera lights of the emotional live interview. They had just experienced an afternoon none of them had ever imagined. From misunderstood and isolated individuals, both had become symbols of integrity and resistance. But little did they know, an even greater storm was waiting behind the scenes. Less than 24 hours after the broadcast, social media exploded with hashtags. Hashtag Stand with Maya, hashtag Justice for Dante. Thousands of messages flooded the studio's inbox. Words of encouragement, shared stories, even small donations from an audience of strangers empathizing with their journey. Maya entered the office the next morning with bright eyes. For the first time in weeks, she felt a real spark of hope. Dante was mopping the hallway floor as usual, but when their eyes met, no words were needed. They knew they stood together on the same front, not just for work but for ideals. "We're doing the right thing, Dante. And this time, I won't back down," Maya whispered as she passed by, like a promise. But that very morning, something was wrong. Some advertisers began to suspend cooperation with the studio. A few tech companies that once supported Maya suddenly announced they were reevaluating their relationship. Even some longtime employees resigned without giving reasons. Maya's assistant, Chloe, walked in with a pale face. "Walter Crenshaw is making moves. I got the news. He's quietly buying up the studio's debts from the bank." Maya froze. Walter didn't slam doors. He knocked softly, and everything crumbled from within. In the following days, sophisticated tricks began to surface. A leaked article accusing Maya of financial manipulation spread across news sites. Though lacking evidence, the article was shared rapidly, sowing doubt. At the same time, Dante was called to HR. "We received complaints that you threatened some female colleagues during the night shift," the supervisor said, avoiding his gaze. Dante stayed silent. No need to defend himself. He knew it was a dirty trick and they were attacking his silence and politeness as a weakness. When Dante told Maya everything, she looked at him with pain. He doesn't need proof. He only needs to sow doubt. A week later, a letter from Walter's law firm arrived for Maya. The content: an offer to buy the studio at an enormous sum with a commitment to keep the brand and some old directions if Maya agreed to step down completely and remain silent forever. He didn't need to fight. He bought silence. Maya stood at the office window looking down at the noisy street below. In her hand was the offer. Across the table, Dante quietly dried his hands. "What will you do?" he asked softly. "I don't know," she said honestly, her voice breaking. "It's not just about me anymore. If I refuse, everyone here will lose their jobs. And if you accept, you won't be yourself anymore." Dante replied. No one said anything else. The silence then was heavier than a refusal. That night, Maya quietly went to the filming studio, abandoned after programs were canceled. Every light and folding chair lay scattered like a battlefield after a storm. She looked around. And there on the editing desk was an old hard drive containing an unreleased video, a secret meeting of Walter's senior advisors planning a disinformation campaign. Her hand trembled. This was evidence. But if made public, they would sue, threaten. If hidden, she couldn't forgive herself. The next morning, she met Dante and put the hard drive on the table. "We have no money. No media. No political network. But we have the truth," he said, staring at her without blinking. They began a counterattack campaign from a tiny backstage room, once an actor's dressing room. Maya contacted a group of brave independent journalists. Dante connected with oppressed labor communities, those exploited by Walter. No longer just two people. They became a fire igniting a cold land of money and power. When the evidence video was released, the community exploded. Walter Crenshaw retaliated, suing Maya for defamation. Mainstream media hesitated, but independent groups, hungry for truth, joined the fight. One evening, Maya received a call from an unknown number. "Maya Williams?" A deep, dangerous voice. "This is the final offer. You have 2 days to withdraw everything and delete that video. Or else, what do you intend to threaten me with?" She interrupted coldly. "I've lost everything already. I have nothing left to fear." A sigh on the other end. Then silence. On the day of the trial, Maya walked in not as a victim but as a warrior. Dante was by her side, not a man falsely accused, but a symbol of resilience. Evidence was presented, media began to shift. Walter's old victims appeared, each telling their story. For the first time in years, the powerful tycoon no longer controlled the stage, and in the front row, Maya lifted her head, eyes no longer afraid. Because for the first time, she fought not just for herself, but for all who never had a chance to speak. Sunlight filtered through the courtroom's glass, casting a beam onto the front row where Maya Williams sat with a straight back and eyes sharp as blades. Beside her, Dante Carter clenched his fists, his gaze fixed on the man ascending the witness stand, a former finance employee of Crenshaw Corporation. The man bowed his head, voice choked as he spoke the long-buried truth. "Walter Crenshaw directed us to alter the audit reports. What Ms. Maya discovered was not a mistake, it was a plan." The entire room fell silent. The media crouched close, microphones poised, waiting for the spark to ignite a flame of outrage. Maya closed her eyes briefly. In that moment, she didn't see justice approaching, she only saw the image of her father, a humble engineer forced to quit for opposing the corporation. She remembered his words, "No one beats the system unless you become part of it to change it." Now, she was not just a part. She was the one challenging it. Walter Crenshaw sat still in the distance, flanked by 2 lawyers dressed in black, his face as expressionless as stone. Yet even in his silence, the cracks spreading from his empire were undeniable. Investors began to withdraw, stocks plummeted, and even politicians who once backed him voiced deep disappointment. In a private press meeting after the trial, Maya was offered a deal, a sum of money. A non-disclosure agreement. "You can open another studio, start a new life. Walter will quietly retreat." She looked at the men, polite but calculating eyes. "I don't want to start over. I want to end what made so many have to start over hundreds of times," she said, then stood up. "I refuse to live in a world where silence is worth more than the truth." She walked away. And as the door closed behind her, an era began to tremble. Crenshaw Corp launched its final weapon, countersuing Maya for leaking insider information, threatening the journalists who reported, and especially releasing a doctored video of Dante with a female colleague aimed to destroy the image of the silent hero. Mainstream media immediately split. Some began to question, is Maya Williams really innocent? Analysis, clips, and commentaries flooded like a tsunami. Dante remained silent for days. He made no defense, gave no interviews, posted nothing on social media. He simply worked as before, but Maya saw clearly his eyes had changed. No longer sad. No longer afraid. Only one thing remained, determination. You don't need to prove anything to anyone, Dante, she said one day when she found him in the laundry room holding his old uniform shirt. We weren't made to please them. We fight so they know what's right. Dante looked up and smiled for the first time. Don't forget, you're not fighting alone. Judgment Day. Hundreds gathered outside the courthouse with banners. Justice is not for sale. Maya and Dante are us. Many had never met Maya, never watched her programs, but they saw themselves in that courage. They came for something bigger than a lawsuit. They came for a belief that justice still exists. Inside, Walter's lawyers read their defense. Every word echoed, insufficient grounds, personal motives, damaging corporate reputation. But their arguments faltered when a recording from a secret meeting between Walter and his advisors was played. A tired but calculating voice came through the speaker. She's too smart. We have no choice but to destroy her image before she reaches the public. The court fell silent. And in that moment, no one could deny it. Walter Crenshaw lowered his head. 3 weeks later, Walter Crenshaw was officially under federal investigation. Assets frozen, Crenshaw Corp's stock crashed dramatically. But Maya didn't celebrate. She returned to the studio, now a beacon for young people wanting to tell the truth. No more grand headquarters. No flashy machines. Just a small room with warm lighting and a sign hanging that read, "No one is born to be silent." Dante became the studio's technical director. He no longer mopped floors, but still arrived earliest and left last. Maya and Dante rarely spoke of romance, but everyone in the studio noticed the quiet trust in their glances. One day, while Maya was reviewing a rough cut of a new show, Dante placed a small box on the table. Inside was an old microphone, the first one Maya used when interviewing a worker fired by Crenshaw years ago. "Keep it," he said, "because you made it valuable." That night, Maya went up to the rooftop. The city below was still lit, still full of schemes, but not without hope. She recalled every time she nearly fell, losing her show, media attacks, being offered silence for money. And then she remembered the times she stood up, the first interview, Dante's eyes, strangers placing hands on her shoulders outside the courthouse. Change, she realized, doesn't come from grand gestures. It begins with one person speaking truth. And another listening. The wind gently brushed through her hair. She closed her eyes. Not to rest, but to prepare for tomorrow, because true victory is not about toppling someone. It's about standing firm in who you are.